That night, my daughter-in-law pointed to the sofa I paid for and said, "You don't belong here." I smiled, placing the file on the glass table right in the middle of her living room. The family stared like I'd blown a fuse, but I just pulled up a QR code linking to the hidden ownership. 5 minutes later, no one dared sit on that couch again because everything in this room, including their secrets, was in my name. My name is Lorraine Hartley. I am 58 years old, a widow, and I spent my life working my way up from a labor background to become a senior auditor at the Grey Line Public Works Authority. I understand numbers. I understand contracts. I understand that the truth is always there, buried in the fine print, long after the polite conversations have faded. It is a skill set that my late husband respected and my new family seems determined to ignore. Tonight, that family was gathered in the 3-story brownstone on Maple Row, here in Briarfield, Michigan. It was a house my son, Daniel, and I had secured, but the party, a second housewarming according to the embossed invitations, was entirely the creation of my daughter-in-law, Savannah Pike. It was not a housewarming. It was a stage performance. Savannah, 31, and radiating a brittle energy, was launching her design studio, Pike and Pine. This party was meant to show off the living room, her masterpiece, her proof of concept for the magazine world she desperately wanted to inhabit. I arrived exactly on time. The sound of curated jazz and expensive laughter spilled out into the humid Michigan night. Before I could even step onto the porch, Savannah was there, filling the doorway. She wore a cream-colored dress that looked like spun silk, and her smile was just as thin. "Lorraine," she said. Her voice was bright, but her eyes were cold. "I'm so glad you could see the room." She didn't move to let me in. Behind her, her mother, Caroline Pike, watched me with undisguised assessment. "Savannah?" I said, holding my small overnight bag. "It looks lovely from here." "About that." Savannah's smile tightened, a fractional, rehearsed adjustment. "There's been a slight change of plans. We've had a massive influx of inventory for the launch, and we're going to need the guest room for storage. I had Daniel move your things." I stood very still. The guest room I had stayed in for 3 years, the one my own furniture was in, the one I had specifically funded as part of the down payment agreement. "Moved them where?" "Savannah." She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture meant to brush away the inconvenience. "Oh, they're by the back door. But the thing is, we just don't have the space. With the team coming in and out all weekend, it's just not practical for you to stay." She finally met my eyes, her own gaze hard as polished stone. "Honestly, with everything going on, you don't belong here tonight." The words landed in the quiet air between us. "You don't belong here." I felt the blood drain from my face, but I kept my spine straight. I am not a woman who cries in public. I am a woman who keeps records. I looked past her shoulder, into the room she was guarding. My eyes, trained by decades of audits, did a quick, cold inventory. The sofa was Italian, a sweeping curve of buttery leather. The rug was a genuine Persian, its intricate weave singing in hues of sapphire and ruby. The chandelier hanging above it all was a waterfall of hand-cut crystal. I knew its exact price. I knew the shipping manifest number. I knew, because every single item, from the sofa to the hidden screws in the custom bookcases, had been purchased from an account I controlled. My son, Daniel, 33, and looking pale, appeared behind his wife. He saw me, then the bag at my feet, and his face crumpled in that familiar expression of avoidance. Mom. Hey, you made it. Daniel? I said, my voice flat. Your wife has just informed me I'm not to stay in my room. Oh, God. He ran a hand through his hair. Sav, I thought we were going to talk to her first. There's nothing to talk about. Savannah snapped, her voice losing its hostess sheen. It's a business decision. She's making this difficult. Mom? Daniel pleaded, turning to me. He lowered his voice, begging me to absorb the embarrassment, to be the one to back down. Please, don't make a scene. Not in the middle of the party. We can talk about this later. A scene. He was worried about a scene. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised to be better than this, now standing there asking me to swallow his wife's insult. I took a slow breath. Then I took a step forward. Savannah, surprised by the direct movement, had to step back. I walked past her, past my son, and into the center of the room. The jazz music swelled and dipped. Conversations faltered as I moved. I ignored them all. I am not making a scene. Daniel, I said, my voice perfectly level, cutting through the music. I reached into my purse, bypassing my wallet, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I walked to the new glass-topped coffee table, the very heart of Savannah's magazine-style triumph. I placed the envelope on the glass. It made a solid, definitive sound. Heavy. Final. I am simply demanding to see the return on an investment I already paid for. I left the envelope sitting there, unopened. A quiet, potent threat that sucked all the celebratory air out of the room. That envelope on the table was not a spontaneous decision. It was the result of 3 years of meticulous, silent accounting. It began 3 years ago, when I sold my small heritage house on the outskirts of Briarfield. It was the house Daniel grew up in, the house I had shared with his father. I sold it, liquidated a life, and put $250,000 down as the primary contribution for this brownstone on Maple Row. It was not a gift. I do not give away my husband's legacy lightly. It was an investment, bound by conditions designed to protect that capital. Daniel, my son, just wanted a home. He was so eager to build a life with Savannah, to have a solid, respectable address. He signed the paperwork without hesitation. The first condition was a promissory note, secured by a second lien on the property, held by the Hartley Trust, which I control. It was simple. Standard procedure to protect my capital. The second condition was the one Savannah balked at. She, 31, and already obsessed with aesthetics, wanted to gut the place. I refused. My terms were clear. The main living room, with its original mouldings and hardwood floors, was to remain structurally untouched. Furthermore, the furnishings for that specific room were to be purchased using a designated account, one I funded and monitored. This was not about taste. It was about asset preservation. The furniture was part of the collateral, Savannah argued, but she needed the money. She needed the house. She had, as she put it, a deadline for the fall Instagram season. She signed. I never intended to be a presence in their marriage. I am not that kind of mother-in-law. I stepped back, letting them build their life. I did not frame the check. I did not demand a plaque. I simply filed the original contract, the signed promissory note, and the lien documentation. And then, I continued to do what I do best. I kept records. When the furniture was delivered, the Italian sofa, the Persian rug, the crystal chandelier I was there. I signed the delivery manifests. I took photographs of the serial numbers on the back of the in-wall cabinets. I have detailed, high-resolution images of the weaver's signature on the rug's border. Every invoice, every wire transfer confirmation, every proof of delivery went into a file, cross-referenced and dated. The relationship began to fray within 6 months. My visits, once spontaneous, were suddenly subject to standardized scheduling. That was Savannah's term. It just helps me plan my content week. Lorraine, she'd said, not looking up from her phone. I looked to Daniel. He was busy, stressed at his own job, and caught in the middle. He chose the path of least resistance silence. So I retreated. I stopped asking to stay over. I accepted the polite, scheduled dinners where I watched them live a life I had funded but was no longer truly part of. When one retreats, one has time to observe. I did not argue. I documented. This room, the one I was now standing in, became Savannah's stage. It was the flagship showroom for Pike and Pine, her fledgling design studio. It was where she entertained potential clients, where she held lookbook photo shoots, where she built an entire brand based on the assets I had secured. The first real breach happened a year ago. I was reconciling the designated account a habit, the muscle memory of an auditor, and I noticed a discrepancy. A charge from a high-end decor supplier for a trial piece, an antique mirror, had been billed as a final purchase. Then another, and another. Small amounts at first, then larger. Items she tested for her clients and then seamlessly absorbed into her portfolio, charging the final purchase to my account. She was using my capital to fund her inventory, writing it off as simple decoration. I did not confront her. I did not call Daniel. I simply drove to the house on a Tuesday when I knew they were both at work. I let myself in with my own key. I found the new mirror, and the new side tables, and the expensive art books. And with a small, specialized kit, I applied a series of microscopic, invisible identifiers to every single piece I had paid for. I updated my photographic records. I added the new invoices to my file. I was not just keeping a record of my assets. I was building a case. The envelope I'd placed on the table was the end of the story, the beginning of the end. The real motivating spark had happened 3 days earlier. It arrived not as a shouted insult, but as a professionally formatted email from Savannah. She had CC'd Daniel. The subject line read, "Exciting updates and logistics for Pike and Pine launch." I read it over my morning coffee. It was full of corporate buzzwords, detailing arrival times for caterers, lighting technicians, and floral designers. Then I reached the section that concerned me. To ensure the integrity of the staging and to prevent any disruption to the creative team, she had written, "We are moving all personal items out of the guest suite. Furthermore, we are requesting that all family members utilize off-site accommodations during the launch week. We find this minimizes foot traffic and protects the client experience." She was ordering me to get a hotel. In the house, I held a lean-on. I stared at the screen. The politeness of the request somehow more insulting than a slammed door. She was treating me like a logistical problem, a piece of furniture to be moved. Before I could formulate a response, not that I intended to, my phone rang. It was not Savannah. It was her mother, Caroline Pike, acting as the designated enforcer. "Lorraine." "Darling," she cooed, her voice like cheap perfume. "Savannah is just frantic about this launch. You understand, don't you? It's a professional operation. We can't have people just..." Lingering. Lingering, I repeated. I wasn't aware I lingered. Caroline. I was aware I had a room. Caroline sighed, a sound of profound theatrical patience. Lorraine. You had a career. A lovely, stable little career in… what was it? Numbers audits, very practical. But you're retired now. When you're retired, you should really learn to be retired. Know your place. Let the young people with energy and vision take the lead. It's their house, after all. It's their house. The words hung in the air, a direct challenge. Thank you for the advice. Caroline, I said, my voice cold as steel. I hung up. I waited for Daniel's call. It took him 2 hours. Predictable and weak. Mum, he began, the sound of exhaustion and preemptive surrender already in his voice. Mum, listen. I know the email was abrupt. It was clear, I said. She's just stressed. The whole Pike and Pine thing is riding on this party. Her mum is winding her up. It's a bad week. So I'm to be kicked out. It's not kicked out. Mum. God. It's just a temporary solution. I'll get you a room at the Hilton. We'll talk about it after the party is over. I promise. Just don't make this a thing. Please. A temporary solution. That was my son. Postpone the conflict. Manage the emotions. And always ask me to be the one to yield. I see. I said. You've made your choice. Daniel? I ended the call. I sat there, not in anger, but in a sudden, sharp clarity. The humiliation was a physical sensation, cold and heavy. But as an auditor, I know that when one thing doesn't add up, you look for other discrepancies. I had been passively monitoring the Homeowners Association finances for Maple Row ever since I signed the lien. The HOA, Blue Spruce Management, had recently levied a steep capital improvement fee on all residents. It was for neighborhood beautification, they claimed. Something Caroline said. Take the lead, stuck in my mind. I opened my laptop and pulled up the HOA's quarterly expense report. Then I opened the shared family cloud storage that Daniel and I still used for tax documents. And there, in a folder Daniel had misfiled, was an invoice. It was from Pike and Pine, billed to Blue Spruce Management, the charge editorial and decorative curation fee. The amount was identical, down to the dollar, to the extra funds the HOA had just demanded from every resident. Savannah was not just redecorating her living room. She was using the entire neighborhood association as her personal bank, billing them for decorating the street and channeling the money straight into her own pocket. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor in Unit 2B, the HOA treasurer. She was a retired accountant, and we had bonded once over a shared disgust for the HOA's landscaping budget. The text was a screenshot of an internal email. The message was from the HOA president to the board. It read, regarding 2B, we have a potential conflict of interest regarding the Pike and Pine invoice, as the vendor is related to the homeowner. However, the vendor is the beneficiary of the home's primary trust holder, not the owner himself. Legal confirms this is grey enough to proceed. Advise we pay and close. They knew. They knew she was Daniel's wife. They knew, and they were hiding it. I looked at the invoice. I looked at the text. I looked at Savannah's email telling me I didn't belong. This was no longer a family squabble. This was fraud. I realized, in that moment, that this was not just about getting my money back. It was about forcing my son to finally open his eyes and see exactly what and who he had married. I wasn't just going to get justice. I was going to teach Daniel how to see. I photographed the invoice. I saved the text. I put everything in the file, and I began to make my own calls. I am retired, but the skills that defined my life do not simply evaporate. They hibernate. Caroline Pike's phone call and Savannah's email woke them up. For 48 hours, I was no longer a widow or a mother. I was Senior Auditor Hartley again, and I was running a full-scale private audit on my own family. The HOA invoice was the key. I cross-referenced the HOA meeting minutes publicly available, but buried deep on their server with their bank statements, which Mrs. Alvarez quietly forwarded me. The money trail was clumsy, designed by amateurs who watch too much television. The HOA, Blue Spruce Management, paid a large sum to a new landscaping company, Briarfield Greens LLC, for emergency tree removal and community planting. Briarfield Greens LLC, I found with a 10-minute search, was registered 6 weeks ago to a post office box. 2 days after receiving the HOA payment, that shell company wired nearly the entire amount, minus a small processing fee, to Pike and Pine. The memo on the wire transfer, subcontractor curation. It was a simple, textbook pass-through. Savannah was laundering HOA fees, using her neighbour's money to fund her party. This led me to Pike and Pine's online presence. Savannah was not just a decorator, she was a content creator. Her social media was a flood of images from my living room, but she also advertised, on a separate website, hourly access to the Maple Row exemplary staging suite. She was renting out my collateral, my living room, as a commercial showroom by the hour to other influencers and photographers. She was monetizing the very assets she was trying to kick me out of, all while violating the HOA's residential-only covenants. My next step was the furniture itself. I pulled my original shipping manifests. The sofa, 1 item. Italian leather. Serial number 774B. The chandelier, 1 item. Crystal. Serial number K919. All shipped to and signed for by Lorraine Hartley. Then, I looked at the Pike and Pine inventory list she had accidentally left in the shared cloud. She had listed the exact same items: my sofa, my chandelier, my rug, as Pike and Pine studio assets. She had, on paper, sold my own furniture back to the living room, effectively creating phantom inventory to secure loans for her business launch. The arrogance was breathtaking, but arrogance gets sloppy. I still had access to the shared cloud drive, the one Daniel set up for family emergencies and taxes. He was disorganized. Savannah was arrogant. It is a potent combination. It took me less than 5 minutes to find an email chain she had saved as a PDF, likely to show Daniel. It was from her mother, Caroline. The subject was, "Securing your future. Honey." The email read, "Savvy. You need to get that house and the furniture under your business name, not Daniel's. That mother-in-law of yours is a numbers person. They are always annoying and always try to hold on. We need to get her name off the lien. Get everything moved into the Pike and Pine Trust. It's cleaner? Just get Daniel to sign whatever. He will not read it. They are always annoying. The universe, it seems, rewards methodical investigation." The next morning, my personal phone rang. It was my private wealth manager at the bank. "Lorraine," he said, his voice tight with professional concern. "We have received an authorization to restructure request against the Hartley Trust lien on the Maple Row property. It authorizes a full subordination to a new business loan. It is highly irregular. And frankly, the signature does not look right." We need your verbal confirmation to proceed. My blood ran cold. Do not proceed, I said. Of course not. We have already flagged it. But Lorraine, the signature on the form is yours, or it is trying to be. I did not sign that. Tom, send me the file. Immediately. He sent it. It was a digital copy, scanned and emailed. My name, Lorraine Hartley, scrawled in a shaky, hesitant imitation. It was laughably bad. A clumsy, desperate forgery. They had tried to sign away my $250,000 lien. That was the final piece. The fraud was complete. I did not call Daniel. I did not call Savannah. I called April Donnelly. April is not a family lawyer. She is a commercial litigation attorney who specializes in asset recovery and fraud. I met her when she audited Greyline. She does not get emotional. I was in her office in 1 hour. I laid out the HOA pass-through, the forged signature, the manifests, the emails. April did not smile. She just started typing. First, she said, her fingers flying. We are filing a UCC1 financing statement against every single piece of tangible property in that living room, linked to their serial numbers. That furniture is now secured collateral, publicly searchable. She cannot sell it, move it, or claim it without committing a felony. Second, I said, the bank. I need that transaction frozen, and the forgery on record. Done? April said. I am sending a formal notice of fraudulent activity and identity theft to the bank's legal department. They will lock that lien down so tight Savannah will not be able to get a credit card, let alone a business loan against it. Third, the HOA. Ah, my favorite, I said. I pulled out Mrs. Alvarez's number. I am formally contacting the Maple Row HOA as a lien holding party of interest to request a special emergency audit of Blue Spruce Management, citing the Briarfield Greens LLC discrepancy. By the time I left April's office, the traps were set. The UCC1 was filed. The bank was on high alert. The HOA board was in a panic. Savannah's perfect party was no longer a business launch. It was a deposition. And I had all the evidence, right in the manila envelope I was now carrying into her living room. The room was no longer a home. It was a set piece. Savannah had transformed her second housewarming into the official launch event for Pike and Pine at Maple Row. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, an expensive, funereal smell, and the high-pitched chatter of networking. I scanned the crowd. These were not Daniel's friends. They were a curated list. I recognized 3 of the top real estate brokers in Briarfield, the ones with their faces on bus benches. I saw the lifestyle editor from the local magazine, and woven through them all, a collection of women who looked exactly like Caroline Pike coiffed, judgmental, and smelling faintly of expensive gin. This was Savannah's target audience. Her goal, as I'd overheard Caroline boasting by the door, was to secure 5 new staging contracts before the night was over. The living room? My living room was the case study. It was the bait. I saw Daniel near the fireplace, trapped in a conversation with one of Caroline's friends. He looked pale, his suit jacket bunching at the shoulders. He was holding a drink he wasn't drinking. His eyes kept darting to the front door, then to his wife, then back to the door. He was waiting for me. He was dreading me. I knew that earlier. Caroline must have cornered him. I could practically hear her voice, that saccharine venom. Daniel, do not let your mother ruin this for Savannah. This is her entire career. You need to manage her. Be a husband. And so, Daniel, my son, was trying to be a husband, which in this family meant choosing silence, standing stiffly in a room full of strangers, and praying the conflict would just resolve itself. He was tense, speaking only when spoken to, a prisoner in his own home. I had, of course, arrived at 7 o'clock precisely. Not early, not late. Punctuality is a form of control. I was not dressed for a party. I wore a simple, dark grey trouser suit. My hair pulled back. I was dressed for a meeting. Under my arm, I carried not a purse, but a slim, professional document case. The manila envelope from earlier was inside it, along with the originals. A young photographer, hired for the event, was circling the room, his flash popping. He was taking detailed shots of the furniture. "Oh, get the leg detail on the console." Savannah directed him, her voice a high-pitched trill. "That's the signature Pike and Pine touch." The photographer knelt, his lens focusing on the carved wood. I smiled, a faint, thin smile that no one saw. He was taking beautiful, high-definition photographs of my UCC-1 secured collateral. Excellent evidence. He moved to the Italian sofa, getting a low-angle shot. "Isn't it divine?" A realtor gushed. "Savannah, where did you source this?" "It's an exclusive vendor," Savannah said, lying with breezy confidence. "It's all about who you know." "I know the shipping agent," I thought. "I know the customs broker." I moved to the bar to get a glass of water. And as I turned, the front door opened again. It was not a guest. It was Mr. Henderson, the regional manager for Blue Spruce Management, the HOA. He looked flustered, his tie askew, and he was holding his own manila envelope. He was not here to congratulate Savannah. He was here because he had received a formal request for an emergency audit from a lien holding party of interest. And his board was in a full-blown panic. He saw me, made brief eye contact, and gave a sharp, nervous nod. He headed straight for Mrs. Alvarez, the treasurer, who was standing by the stairs, looking grim. The stage was set. The key players were in position. Savannah, oblivious, clapped her hands together. "Everyone, everyone!" she called out. She flicked a switch. The crystal chandelier above us, my chandelier, flared to life, flooding the room with brilliant, unforgiving light. Every face, every nervous tick, every carefully constructed smile was illuminated. "Thank you all for coming," she beamed, standing in the center of the Persian rug. "Welcome to the future of Briarfield design." It was the perfect entrance, a perfect spotlight, a perfect, beautiful stage for what was to come. This was not a tantrum. What I did, standing in that room, was not an impulse. I do not act on impulse. I act on data. Savannah, her mother. They live in a world of social aggression, of whispers and public slights. They are amateurs. I am a professional. My goal was not to humiliate them. It was to terminate the threat. It was a dispassaginate, surgical plan, set in motion 48 hours before I even stepped through the door. The plan was structured in 2 layers. The first layer was the one April Donnelly, my attorney, had prepared. It was about the tangible assets, the things we could see. April is a digital native. She understood that a public, digital shaming was the only language Savannah would truly understand. She created a simple, secure, public-facing web page. The QR code on my phone was the key. It did not link to a cat video. It linked to the Hartley Trust public disclosure file. On it, she had uploaded the scanned, signed promissory note for $250,000. She had uploaded the publicly recorded second lien on the Maple Row brownstone, and, most critically, she had uploaded the UCC-1 financing statement she filed yesterday, the one that listed every major piece of furniture in this very room by brand, description, and serial number as secured collateral against my loan. The sofa they were sitting on, the chandelier lighting their faces, the rug beneath their feet. It was all mine. And now, it was all public record. But I am a woman who believes in analog redundancy. Technology can fail. People, when properly motivated, do not. I had also tracked down Mason. He was the head of the delivery team that furnished this room 3 years ago. I remembered him because he was meticulous. I found him now running a small restoration shop. I paid him a $200 consultation fee to be at a cafe 3 blocks away, holding the original carbon copy delivery manifests I had kept. He was waiting for my text, ready to walk in and identify his own signature next to the serial numbers. That was Layer 1. Layer 2 was the HOA. This was my territory. April sent the legal warning, but I drafted the audit request. As a lien holding party of interest, I had standing. I sent a formal letter to the Blue Spruce Management Board, demanding an immediate freeze on all non-utility expenditures pending a special audit. I specifically cited the Briarfield Greens LLC payment. We demanded 6 months of full, unedited bank statements. Mr. Henderson, the panicked man by the door, was the result of that letter, and standing beside him, looking vindicated, was Mrs. Alvarez, the treasurer. She had agreed, at my request, to be here. In her purse was a draft report highlighting every financial discrepancy she had suspected for the last year. My contingencies were also in place. I had already spoken to my bank manager. The Hartley Trust lien was now under a red flag advisory. Any attempt to refinance, restructure, or draw equity against this house would trigger an automatic fraud alert and a hard freeze. The forged signature was already in a file at their legal department, and, parked in a commercial loading zone 1 street over, was a truck from a professional art and furniture transport service. I had them booked for 8 o'clock. If my ownership was questioned, they were contracted to immediately enter, wrap, and remove every piece of UCC-tagged collateral. All of this, the legal filings, the witnesses, the financial audit, was the machinery of truth. But there was one piece of the plan that was purely personal. It was in my document case, beneath the filed UCC-1. It was a single, handwritten letter, sealed in a simple envelope. It was addressed to Daniel. It was not an emotional letter. I do not plead. It was a statement of facts. It listed the date of the $250,000 wire transfer. It listed the terms of the note. It listed the date of the attempted bank forgery. It listed the total of the fraudulent HOA invoices. It did not say, "I am disappointed." It said, "This is the line." I looked up at Savannah, who was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, oblivious. She was the hostess of a party that she believed was her launch. But I was the one who had set the stage. I was the director, and I had just called action. Savannah finished her speech to a scattered, nervous applause. My presence by the wall, impassive and silent, had poisoned the air. The guests, sensing the disconnect, looked from her brilliant, forced smile to my dark, tailored suit. She could not ignore me. She walked toward me, a fixed smile stapled to her face. The crystal chandelier lit the fury in her eyes. "Lorraine!" she hissed, Her voice, a low, furious whisper, meant only for me. But the room was so quiet. Everyone heard it. "You are making my guests uncomfortable. You are ruining this. I have had enough. I want you to leave. You do not belong here." There it was again, the final, public declaration. "You are absolutely right," I said, my voice clear and calm, projecting to every corner of the room. "It is time to clarify who and what belongs where." I walked away from her, to the glass coffee table in the center of the room. The guests parted, a sea of startled faces. I did not reach for the manila envelope. I simply took out my phone, unlocked it, and placed its screen up on the glass. On the screen was a single, complex QR code. "What is that?" Savannah asked, her voice sharp. "What are you doing?" "I am providing transparency," I said. A young realtor, his curiosity overcoming his manners, pulled out his own phone and scanned the code. His jaw went slack. "Oh my God," he breathed. "What?" Caroline Pike demanded, striding forward. "What is this nonsense?" The realtor was scrolling, his face pale. It's a public file. It's the Hartley Trust. There is a $250,000 promissory note and a second lien." He kept scrolling. "And a UCC1 filing, filed yesterday. It lists—" He looked around the room, horrified. "It lists this sofa, and the chandelier, and the rug. It lists all of it, by serial number, as secured collateral." The room erupted in whispers. Caroline turned purple. "This is private family business. This is harassment." She lunged, her hand shooting out to grab my phone from the table. "I would advise against that. Mrs. Pike." A new voice said. It was April Donnelly, my lawyer, who had just stepped through the open door, looking calm and utterly unimpeachable. "That is my client's personal property. The documents you see, however, are now, as of 3 o'clock yesterday, fully public record. Anyone can see them." "Public record," Savannah said, her voice cracking. What UCC? I bought this furniture. This is my inventory for Pike and Pine." "Is it?" I asked. I nodded toward the door, where another man now stood, holding a clipboard. "Mason, thank you for coming. You delivered the furniture to this room 3 years ago. Do you recognize any of it?" Mason, the delivery man, stepped forward. He looked at the sofa. He looked at his original manifest. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hartley. Italian sofa. Model 402. Serial number 774B. Signed for by you. That's my signature right there." He pointed to the chandelier. "And the crystal fixture. Serial K919. Also you." "But I staged it," Savannah protested, her voice rising to a wail. "Yes, you did." Another voice said. It was Mrs. Alvarez, the HOA treasurer, stepping forward with Mr. Henderson, who looked like he was about to be sick. "And it seems you staged our entire neighborhood." Mrs. Alvarez held up a piece of paper. "The Maple Row HOA board," she announced, "has received a formal demand to investigate this invoice from Pike and Pine for editorial and decorative curation. We were wondering why the fee exactly matches the funds we just paid to a shell company called Briarfield Greens. We are formally requesting a full repayment. Mrs. Pike Hartley, pending a criminal investigation." The realtors looked like they had seen a ghost. They were edging toward the door. Savannah's head whipped around, her eyes landing on the one person who had not spoken. "Daniel, Are you going to let her do this? She is attacking me. She is attacking your wife. You're not protecting me. My son, Daniel, stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing, a fish drowning in air. Mom, Sav, this isn't the time. I am not attacking anyone. Daniel, I said, my voice cutting through his stammering. I am protecting the truth. And the truth, April said, raising a small remote, is always better with visual aids. She aimed the remote at the projector Savannah had set up for her presentation. It whirred to life. The Pike and Pine logo vanished from the wall, replaced by a single, stark document. On the left was a high-resolution scan of my real signature. On the right, the shaky, pathetic, fraudulent forgery that had tried to restructure my lien. That, April said into the dead silence, is the authorization someone sent to the bank in my client's name. As you can see, the signatures do not match. The bank refers to this as wire fraud. The silence in the room was a physical weight. No one spoke. No one moved. No one dared to utter the phrase, belongs to, ever again. The serial numbers, the bank statements, and the signatures were doing all the talking for them. This is absurd. Caroline Pike finally shrieked, her voice cracking the horrified silence. The image of the forged signature was still glowing on the wall. This is a private family matter. Lorraine gave that furniture to her son as a wedding present. It was a gift. April Donnelly, my lawyer, did not even turn to look at her. A gift, Mrs. Pike gifts do not typically come with promissory notes. She pulled a single, crisp document from the file in her hand. This is the original wire transfer confirmation for the $250,000, dated April 19th, 3 years ago. I direct your attention to the memo line, which my client insisted on. She read, her voice clear and precise, cutting through the heavy air. Secured advance against note dated same. Collateral to be identified. April looked up, her gaze sweeping across the remaining guests. There was no gift. There was only a contract that was not only breached, but which someone attempted to fraudulently terminate. But that's a lien on the house, Savannah stammered, desperately trying to find footing. The furniture is just decor. It's my inventory. It's Pike and Pine. That is the first twist. Savannah, April said, almost gently. The collateral to be identified. That's the furniture. The UCC1 financing statement we filed with the state yesterday makes it official. My client, Mrs. Hartley, is not just a lion holder on this property. She is the primary secured creditor for every single asset in this room. You do not own it. You never did. You were, at best, borrowing it. April's gaze then shifted, moving with deliberate intent to the 3 realtors who were clustered by the door, looking like they were plotting an escape. Which brings us to the second twist, April continued. The trap of public reputation. You were hoping to sign staging contracts tonight, weren't you? The realtors froze. I took the liberty of looking up your standard Pike and Pine contract template, April said. It is, foolishly, available on your website. I direct your attention to Section 4, Warranty of Title. It is a clause where you, Savannah, personally guarantee that all staged items are owned free and clear by Pike and Pine. Correct. One of the realtors, a woman in a sharp blazer, visibly winced. That is standard boilerplate, she muttered, And by attempting to get those contracts signed, April pressed, using assets you do not own, assets that are, in fact, secured by a creditor you just tried to defraud, you would be committing fraud against them. The male realtor pulled a rolled-up contract from his jacket pocket and dropped it on a side table as if it were coated in acid. "I am out," he said. "Do not call my office." He and the other two realtors filed out the door, the click of the latch echoing in the room. Mr. Henderson, the HOE manager, finally stepped forward, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "In light of, well, all of this," he announced, "Blue Spruce Management is immediately freezing all accounts payable to Pike and Pine and its affiliates, pending the full audit." The room was rapidly emptying. The party was over. Caroline was a statue of silent fury. Savannah was slowly, visibly crumbling, her eyes blank. It was then that a phone buzzed, a loud, insistent vibration on the silent glass table. It was Daniel's. He looked at it. His face, already pale, turned to absolute ash. He did not say anything, just stared at the screen, his hand shaking. "Daniel," I asked. It was the first word I had spoken to him directly in 10 minutes. He looked up from the phone, his eyes wide with a new, horrifying kind of understanding. It is my boss," he whispered. "The promotion, the one I have been working on for 6 months." "What about it?" April asked, her voice softening just a fraction. "It is gone," he said, his voice hollow. "He just texted me. He said they are pulling my application. An anonymous email was sent to HR and the executive board this afternoon." He swallowed, reading from the screen. "It accused me of gross familial conflict of interest and colluding with my mother to defraud my wife's business. It said I was unstable and compromised." A terrible, suffocating silence filled the room. Savannah actually looked confused, as if this was one piece of data she could not process. But Caroline just stared at the hardwood floor. April, who missed nothing, simply nodded. "The email. Daniel. We know about it. We traced the IP address it was sent from." Daniel's head snapped up. "What? It was not anonymous," April said, her voice flat. "The one that just cost you your promotion. The one that was clearly designed to paint Lorraine as the enemy and you as a victim. To isolate you from her permanently. It was sent at 10:17 this morning from a device logged into the Pike family guest Wi-Fi account." The air in the room cracked. The shift was complete. This was beyond theft. It was annihilation. The showcase had fully transformed into an interrogation, and the accused were now clear. I had not moved. I had not raised my voice. I just stood by the wall, watching the truth, in all its brutal forms, finally come into the light. The revelation of the email IP address sucked the last remaining oxygen from the room. Daniel stared at the floor, his face a mask of sick comprehension. He had not just been managed, he had been actively, maliciously sabotaged. Savannah did not explode. She imploded. The brittle energy, the Pike and Pine persona, shattered. Her shoulders slumped, and she put a hand against the wall to steady herself. "I did not know," she whispered, her voice a raw, childish thing. "I did not know about the email. I promise." She looked at her mother, her face a mess of confusion and dawning horror. "But the rest," she said, sinking into a chair, one of my chairs. She just pushed so hard. I had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect. or I was a failure. She said you were trying to control us, to hold the money over us. I did it for you, Caroline snapped, her voice a defensive, metallic bark. I did it to protect you, to give you the life you deserved, the one I never had. That woman, she pointed a finger at me, was never going to let you be independent. I was helping you build your own assets. The room was completely silent. Caroline's words, meant as a justification, landed as an open confession of intent. Daniel finally looked up. He was not angry. He was finished. He had the flat, dead-eyed look of a man who has finally, after a lifetime of denial, accepted an incurable diagnosis. He spoke, not to Caroline, not to Savannah, but to the room at large. No, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an absolute, chilling finality. No more. I have spent 3 years listening to you. He looked at Caroline. And I have spent 3 years making excuses for you. He looked at Savannah. I have apologized, and managed, and deflected, and lied to her. His eyes finally met mine, and they were full of a terrible, clear shame. I let this happen, because I was afraid of the noise. I was afraid of this exact moment. He took a step toward his wife. But I will not sacrifice my mother's reputation, or her financial security, to keep your mother's approval. I will not sacrifice my own career to protect your public image. I am done. It was the first time in his adult life I had ever seen him draw a true, unassailable boundary. April Donnelly, ever the pragmatist, stepped into the void. Good. Then here is what happens next. Her voice was all business. 1. We are going to conduct a full videotaped inventory of the secured assets in this room, right now. 2. The furniture will be legally sealed. It will not be moved, sold, or touched until the bank fraud investigation is complete and the HOA audit is satisfied. 3. There will be a meeting at 9 o'clock Monday morning with the bank's fraud department and 1 at 11 with the HOA board to arrange for the restitution of funds. Daniel nodded, accepting the terms without question. He looked at me, his face hollow, searching for what forgiveness. An escape I did not offer it. I met his gaze and held it. I made a promise to my money, Daniel, and to this room. I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm keeping that promise. What you do with your marriage, that is your choice. I had separated the collateral from the emotion. The decision was now his, alone. He turned back to Savannah. She was watching him, her face wet with tears, her breath hitched in panic. She had no one. Her mother was a liability. Her guests were gone, and her husband had just detached. Savannah, he said, using that same cold, quiet voice. You will pack a bag. You will go and stay with your mother. You will not contact my mother. You will not access our joint accounts, which I am freezing in 1 hour. Daniel. No. She gasped. You will, he continued, overriding her. Begin individual therapy. We will go to counseling. But if you lie to me one more time, if you obstruct the audit, or if your mother sends one more email, we will begin a civilized, quiet, and rapid separation. Do you understand me? She had no cards left to play, no assets, no leverage, no public opinion to weaponize. She was adrift, and he was the only lifeline, one he was offering on his own, strict terms. She just nodded, a series of short, convulsive movements. This is outrageous, Caroline finally yelled. You can't do this. I'll complain. I'll sue you all. April smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. Sue us for what, Mrs. Pike? For documenting fraud, for stopping a theft. If you are not a party to the agreements being signed tonight, I suggest you vacate the premises. You are, at this point, trespassing. Do not force me to call the police. Again. Caroline's mouth snapped shut. The few people remaining, Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Henderson, had been watching me as if I were a lit bomb. Now. Their gaze softened. The perception in the room had irrevocably shifted. I was not the one who had set the fire. I was just the one who had finally, and publicly, pulled the alarm. I was, it turned out, the only sane one in the room. The party debris was gone. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the living room had been converted from a chaotic stage to a sterile boardroom. The air, heavy with last night's perfume and betrayal, was now sharp with the smell of printer ink. April was at the head of the glass table, which was now covered in settlement documents. Daniel sat on one side, I sat on the other. Savannah and Caroline, looking grey and sleep-deprived, were already present when I arrived. There was no discussion. There was no negotiation. April simply dictated the terms. First, Savannah would sign a legally binding agreement to repay the full, audited amount misappropriated from the Maple Row HOA on a strict, non-negotiable schedule. Second, she would immediately cease and desist all operations of Pike and Pine from this residential address, withdrawing all branding and cancelling her commercial showroom listings. "And the furniture?" Savannah asked, her voice a flat, dead monotone. It was the only time she spoke. "The furniture remains," April stated, tapping her pen on the UCC-1 filing. "It will stay in this room under legal seal." She nodded to the small, discreet tags we had placed on the corner of the sofa, the base of the chandelier, and the back of the cabinets. "It stays as a physical reminder of the collateral until the original $250,000 note is satisfied in full, or Mr. Hartley chooses to buy out his mother's interest at a fair market valuation." While the first signatures were drying, April's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. "That was the bank's fraud department," she announced to the room. "They confirm all restructuring attempts are permanently frozen. The file on the forged authorization has been escalated to their internal investigations team." Caroline Pike, who had been stiff as a board, finally stirred. You called the police," she whispered, a new, cold fear in her eyes. April looked at her, not with anger, but with a bland, professional disinterest. "No, Mrs. Pike. We did not. The bank is handling this. They find it much more effective to handle these matters internally, to protect their own liability. You will receive a formal notice from their legal department regarding your involvement. I suspect you will not be banking with them again." A cold, administrative email. No sirens, no dramatic arrest. Just the quiet, irreversible closing of doors. It was, I knew, far more terrifying to Caroline than handcuffs. She said nothing else. April slid the final document across to Daniel. The boundary addendum. He read it and signed without hesitation. It was simple. I, Lorraine Hartley, retained the right to normal, reasonable presence and access to my son's home. I was not to be managed or scheduled or hosted by anyone else. And, most critically, any financial decision regarding the property, any sale, any refinancing, any equity line required my written, notarized consent as the primary lien holder. The lock was absolute. After signing, Savannah stood. She did not cry. She did not make excuses or attempt to blame her mother. She looked hollowed out, but for the first time, she looked real. She picked up the small overnight bag she had been ordered to pack and walked to the door, leaving for the temporary apartment Daniel had arranged. She would start individual therapy on Tuesday. Later that day, the HOA board announced the full-scale audit and the recovery of the misappropriated funds. There was, Mrs. Alvarez told me, applause at the meeting. Not for the drama, my neighbours in Briarfield were not interested in that. They clapped because their money, their own hard-earned capital, had been respected and returned. That evening, the house was quiet. The legal tags were barely visible. I stood in the living room, alone, until Daniel walked in. He just stood there, looking at the room that had almost cost him his marriage, his career, and his mother. I walked to the window and pulled open the heavy curtains. The late afternoon sun poured in, landing on the glass table, right where I had placed the file less than 24 hours earlier. It was just a table again. I did not do this to win. Daniel, I said, my voice quiet in the still room. I did not need to win. I needed the truth, and I needed you. He was quiet for a long time. I watched him as he looked at the Italian sofa. He slowly bent down, gripped the side of the heavy matching armchair, the one no one had dared sit in, and slid it across the hardwood floor, turning it to face the sofa. It made a space, an opening in the perfect arrangement. He looked at the empty cushion, then at me. Sit here. Mum, he said, his voice raw but steady. This is where you belong. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please share your thoughts and comments below so we can connect. Do not forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.